So let's call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for.
Sorry, I can check. Sorry.
That's okay. Thanks for everyone who's coming to probably one of our earliest advisory board meetings in advance of the subsequent town meeting. Thanks for your attendance and for those who are joining us on television and in the audience. Our agenda tonight, we're going to talk about the meeting schedule coming up between now and annual meeting, talk about the budget process, which has been discussed a lot, set up our department assignments. It's customary for the advisory board, each member to volunteer to devote particular attention and time to a department to understand its workings, the budget, what's going on, which is helpful context. I had also hoped and talked with Kevin to get a select board member here as the advisory board contact. I did talk a bit with Kevin on Monday about some procedural issues before their meeting, so I can report on that when we talk about the budget process.
We're also going to try to set a schedule for department head meetings.
Oh, okay, very good.
Okay.
And then approve minutes.
So we may want to wait, Arthur, until we have a larger crowd to pick the liaisons.
Oh, okay, just defer that.
Yeah, because we don't have everybody here.
But we have Jim here, and Jim is just a volunteering kind of guy.
We're off to a good start,
Okay, in any event, so schedule. Do you want to go ahead and go through the?
Sure. So I have set up, Blythe, do you mind joining me at the table to talk a little bit about this? Just to cover us.
Password for the internet here?
Oh, the Wi-Fi?
Yeah, it's
Nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you. Capital
Good to be
and.
seen. It's on camera. I'm very
Oh,
about
there you
it.
go.
Oh, no, I don't want to do that,
Okay.
sorry, thank you.
Never mind.
Thank
I
you,
didn't
Mike.
sleep well.
Somebody write it down and pass it around.
Okay, it used to not be left out
Here.
last time I was.
So what I did to cover us for meeting schedules was I went on to our posting site, My Town Government, and scheduled meetings from this evening through April 29th, which is really too close to town meeting. We won't be meeting April 29th because we will have to have the warrant out before then, so I can get rid of that. And I don't believe, Blythe, last night, what was the timetable for when you thought the budget would be done and ready to come this way?
My plan is to have it done early the last week in January. The departments turn their budgets in tomorrow. We'll spend, Todd and I will spend all next week meeting with them one-on-one and going through them all. And then, since this year, we're trying to produce actual budget book. Something between the spreadsheet we've been giving at a town meeting for a number of years and the GFOA award-winning budget, so we're in the middle of that. And so I'm not exactly sure how much time it's gonna take to put together, but I'm targeting early the last week in January to get out the book and that we're gonna have, and what the zero increase budget looks like and means, and a 3%, or what I would think of perhaps as level service budget looks like and means. If there's anything outside of that, for instance, next year, there are 3 elections, and this year there was 1. There's simple math, we have to plan for 2 more elections, some things that just hit the calendar have to get done regardless. And so we're trying to lay all that out so everyone can understand this is what each means, these are the choices, and then we can hopefully have the good debates about what each of those are about.
Are we doing the zoning bylaws too this cycle or not?
No, the interest from the B1 zoning meeting on Monday night was that I guess the consensus was to push it to the fall, and
Okay.
part of the reason for that is that tomorrow, Rich McCarthy and I are going to a meeting in Brockton. The state has awarded us a grant in the amount of $224,000 to study the sewer treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, and what are the options for reallocating capacity. I don't think expansion, but there may be a little bit some of that. What are the opportunities that might impact what you might do to rezone the B1 district?
Okay.
So,
Ask a question?
Yes, please.
Would that grant allow you to either pay for or explore expanding what the capacity of that system might be in terms of its usage? For
I
example.
believe so, yeah.
And so it would include the ability to move it down Main Street? potentially.
Perhaps, yeah, and Rich knows the intimate details.
Because it has a lot of capacity that isn't being used.
Yes,
as you
yes,
well
we
know.
do know that, and, but we also don't know what the people who have been allotted capacity but haven't used it plan to do. So there's a bit of moving parts, and it seemed like it was it would be helpful to better understand that before we then recommend a town meeting that property should be zoned in a different way, or the
Okay.
rules of the zoning that
Got it.
district should be different.
That makes sense.
So that will be one of the large focuses, and then it'll come back in the fall cycle.
Their goal is to have it come back in the fall.
I know there were several articles which were tentatively submitted but then withdrawn in our last cycle regarding zoning.
They were all related to that.
To this, okay,
Yeah.
so it's all that, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So those are all going to the fall.
That's what I understand right now. Whether
Okay.
there's gonna be other zoning articles,
That's good news.
as I sit here today, we just sent out the notice
Understood.
saying warrants open, so I've got a list going of all the usual stuff we need to do for town meeting for the spring. But what I don't know yet is what other things boards or committees or citizens would like to bring forward.
Just given how the last meeting cycle went, I'd love to build in a bit more time for us to have contact with the zoning folks.
Oh,
such that
absolutely,
we
yeah,
can-
that's why we
yeah.
opened the warrant last night.
Got
It
it.
closes February 13th.
Okay,
And so that gives myself and departments and town council a little more time to get it drafted and get it being circulated, and more time for all of you to have the meetings to debate those things, I believe. Because we don't really, I think we had it on to sign it April 21st, something like that. I gotta go back and look at the calendar.
Okay.
but,
very good. So that means at the high level, after tonight's meeting, we're not gonna need any more meetings, I think, in January until the budget process, at least the first pass is
Mhm.
complete. And then starting, was it February 5th, I think I see?
So Susan Klein had reached out, and they may not wanna do this, I'll have to double check, that the B1 group wanted to meet with the advisory board, but
Okay.
they're bumping everything to the fall.
Yeah, I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I
part
didn't
of the
stay to the
plan.
bitter end of their
Yes,
meeting Monday, so.
I'll check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? And see if that's still something
Although
that they're
that's,
interested in doing.
although there are some things that are happening in January that I think will be good for us to pay attention to, and that'll come up. And with that being said, any questions about the schedule? We're just gonna book meetings, frankly, starting in February until, I think it's town meeting, or at least until
Till April
we have to
22nd.
send out the, yeah.
Or whatever
Every
date
Wednesday?
Blythe has the warrant
So
signed.
every Wednesday from when to when?
From February 5th.
Till tentatively April 22nd, maybe April 15th, I'm not sure. Oh, we have
I mean, what's a
a
little,
hand in the audience.
Yes, question?
It's not a question, I'm on the B1 committee. and-
Oh, very nice, okay.
And we are looking for a date with the advisory board, the 5th or the 12th. We
Okay.
left both of those dates open, and we're just waiting for your back input just to see which would work.
Okay.
Make sure Susan will be here for those.
Yeah.
She,
She-
Yes, Jim?
You know, I'm the new guy here on the block, so I will, obviously, whatever you need to do, you need to do. But I did not know, obviously, 3 weeks ago that I was gonna be on this board. And I have every Wednesday in February booked.
Understood.
But I don't know if that can be changed. Tuesdays, it's ironic, it's only Wednesdays.
Okay. Understood.
Every other night is free. I will try to change some of them if we stay to Wednesdays. The 5th, I cannot change.
Okay.
I will try to change the 12th and 19th. I admit these are college hockey assignments that I referee, that I took the schedule several months ago. I'll try to change them, but it's late in the season to do that.
Understood. No, I understand.
I'll do my best, but I know the 5th I cannot change.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I will add that I also did not know it would be Wednesdays when I took this board as well, and Wednesdays are the worst day of the week for me. I will also move things as I need to, but
Okay.
if in general at some point in another cycle we could talk about if Wednesdays are still the right day for the committee, as the committee changes over time, that would be helpful. Obviously not for like this cycle, but
I don't
in the
feel
future.
alone, thank you.
Yeah, if we do have members with ongoing commitments on Wednesdays and that's not looking
Yeah.
good, by all means, we could talk about an alternate day, whether it's, I think only really Mondays are bad, aren't they? Because
No,
it's-
Tuesdays, because the selectmen
Select-
meet on Tuesdays, and so that would not allow us to have Blythe and/or Todd attend our meetings.
Which would leave us Thursdays and Mondays?
So Mondays or Thursdays would be.
Mondays and Thursdays are open for me through the whole process.
Thursdays are always bad for me.
Yeah, so I realize that somebody will always
That's
be hard
fine.
for someone, but
I
I figured
know,
since
I
you were
know.
saying it, I would
Yeah,
also.
I mean, when I looked at this, I said, oh, Lord.
The beauty of having an organizational meeting early on is that's why we're talking about this.
That's why we have 9 members,
I
right?
appreciate your
Always-
consideration.
Let's send out an email and just find out.
Best day.
So I'm hearing Monday works for everyone present? No?
Well, I mean, I also have hockey commitment on Monday. Tends to be late,
Hmm.
but
Hockey's everywhere, wow.
hockey's
Nice.
everywhere.
Nice.
And it should be a priority.
Are you involved too in that?
Well, I play.
I know Wednesdays are nice
Are you
because
in
they
men's
come
league
after
down there?
select board meetings, so if
Yeah,
something
not
happens
Norfolk.
that is relevant, we have the ability to know that
Mondays
that
and
happens,
Thursdays
right?
work
When
for
that
me.
happens.
Thursdays are nice that way, I know.
Right.
Okay, so.
Either your Wednesdays calm down after February? Or?
No, my husband works one Wednesday a month, so it just depends on what the meetings are. So there'll be at least one Wednesday each month that I can't do, but that's one of the
Okay, I'll
four.
send out an
So-
email and we'll see what feedback we get.
You think?
Okay.
I may be changing my schedules.
And obviously, it can't work for everybody, but we want to be as accommodating and get the Pareto optimal solution here. Very good. Okay, any other questions about schedule? Already had some audience input, that was convenient. Let's
I
talk
would just say
about,
one thing on the warrant.
Yes,
I mean,
please.
the state law only requires the warrant for the annual to be posted a week in advance. But with our own bylaw that says we have the moderators meeting at least 2 weeks in advance, that's where it gets a little, so, the last meeting in April that the selectmen have on the regular schedule is the 21st.
okay,
If we needed to, ourselves another week and we wanted to grant ourselves another week, we could do that. We'll just see how the
Okay.
workload goes.
that's good to know. Okay, budget.
Can I start?
Sure, do you have some comments?
Yes, for the advisory board budget.
Yes.
So Blythe has asked all of the department heads to look through their budgets. The advisory board budget has pretty much stayed the same. The salary was decreased when I left and somebody took over. But, and we're not, this certainly isn't that it's going to happen, but one of the questions that came from a conversation with Blythe and I is, after this May, I'm no longer going to be doing the advisory board.
Mhm.
And, you know, Blythe wanted me to kind of float out there, is there somebody on the board that may be interested in taking meeting minutes, preparing the materials, setting up the meetings, copying what's needed for the meetings, getting the minutes approved and turned into the town clerk. And we would see some savings there. It may not be possible. It's a $6,000 stipend, so
Mhm.
that's the amount that would be saved. Our reserve fund has traditionally been $50,000 for some time, and Blythe's recommendation is that we keep it at $50,000. And then the other big discussion that we have, which if you have been on the advisory board for any length of time, you've been part of, is the mailing or the not mailing of the warrants. You know, we made a decision that we don't have to mail them, we voted that.
Postcards.
Right, we would send postcards. There's no real great savings with postcards anymore. The mail has changed that, United States Postal Service. But the warrants, you know, can cost us anywhere, I think the least expensive one I saw, including postage, was about $2,000.
Mhm.
It was an 18-page warrant to have it printed, to have it mailed to all of the residents, and to have some copies available for us at town hall. The last couple of years, we've only done exactly what we need for the mailing for the residents, and I've come in the evenings and did the actual photocopying for the 250 warrants that we place out throughout the town.
Library and.
The library, the COA, and the post office, and the places where they're posted, and then I make an additional couple of hundred to bring to the meeting for those people that maybe didn't remember to bring their warrant that we may or may not have mailed. So, just something to throw out there.
Mhm.
I cannot pinpoint that if you don't mail a warrant at all, you'll save X number of dollars, because we never know how big a warrant is going to be until the bitter end. You're running to the post office with it when it's finally, done and they're throwing it on a scale. But those were some of the talks, conversations that I had as with regard to the advisory budget. Our supply budget is really minimal, and again, difficult to say whether we change, because what I do is, I have to obviously order all the paper for all those warrants that I'm printing. I do all of the minutes from home, or in the evenings or weekends, because I'm paid outside of my regular job. So, I'm reimbursed for the ink that I buy to do this. I do have a dedicated printer for just this stuff. So again, it's a difficult budget to say whether we could cut from our supply budget, because we don't know. Maybe one year I buy a case too much of paper because the warrant isn't as big as I anticipated it be.
You could use it next time.
But I use it next time. It's not wasted, it's not used for anything else. When I was upstairs, there were times where we kept it separately, so it can absolutely be used for something else. But those are really the three areas that you could look to change. I just wanted to be the first one out of the gate.
Sure, just to deal with our own house, which is not particularly large, but still we want to be, efficient. Of the warrants that are printed, which we put out at town meeting, and also before town meeting at the library, town hall, etc., do we end up throwing a bunch away afterwards? I mean, does it seem like that they're consumed?
So we probably, it depends on what's on it, because it depends on the audience that is drawn. I will tell you, the town meeting about the school roof, we did not throw one away. When the school roof was on our warrant, I didn't have any to throw away. Typically, I probably throw anywhere from 20 to 50 away. But we also don't want to get caught without enough for everybody that comes.
There was some concern raised at selectmen's meetings around town meeting that we weren't mailing it in the fall. We only sent the postcard, and we said, well, it's a cost-saving measure, maybe albeit not as big a one as it used to be, to send the postcard. We put it on the website, we get it around town, and so on. So it can be done either way. We're just trying to make sure that we're doing it the way the town wants.
Okay, you're just opening this up for discussion.
Yeah.
I am generally in favor of printing warrants and mailing them. In my 20-some odd years in town meeting attendance has declined, and a lot of it, I think, is related to the fact that you don't get a warrant in the mail. Postcards come, sometimes you read it, sometimes it doesn't get read. A warrant's a little bit more difficult to ignore. People may take the time to look at it and get engaged on something. They won't necessarily take the postcard over the computer. It's my opinion, but I think it helps get a percentage of people who show up at town meeting that don't normally show up at town meeting, or aren't activated to want to show up at town meeting until they get that in front of them.
So in a way, it's
I
marketing.
will second David's comments. I think it's a mistake not to mail the warrant. And I've been an advocate of getting back to mailing it for some time. I think it informs the citizens. You get better application, you get better participation, you have better people informed when they get to the meeting. I have not heard a comment in favor of the postcard. Let me just put it that way.
I know last time this was discussed, there was a couple of advisory board members who were pretty passionate about, I'm trying to remember who it was.
Keeping mailing it,
Jonathan?
No.
not mailing it.
Postcards only.
They're not here.
Jonathan, right? Well,
They're here. I mean, but there are some concerns. I happen to agree, but I mean, just to put on the table that, if there's a green issue, are we being wasteful? And everything else, we all gotta drive to work. We use fossil fuels to do that. So I think where I personally sort of level out on this is that having people show up is important, having them show up informed is important. And to me, that outweighs the waste in having a printed material.
See, would it cost me more to put it on a really lively colored paper, so it stands out from the rest of the mail.
Glows.
What color did you have in
Like
mind?
the recreation department one that we get in the mail.
Well,
It's
but you
always-
notice it. I'm just saying with that.
How about
But
red?
that's a whole, that's a catalog now,
Yeah,
postcard.
that's true.
Well,
It's an
Right, so
interesting
then,
idea.
which is great.
Thus the cherry
That
sheets.
just means that we would be looking to, when I attend the meeting on the budget for this, before the select board, that we would be looking for a budget increase in our printing line item. So I might be looking for some backup to attend with me, because that's not the message that's being sent, you know, although I hear what everybody here is saying. And I think that maybe Blythe changing it to something that catches your eye, maybe I can talk to Ann and.
Perhaps the cover, just.
Something like that.
Well, I
just-
mean, I think Kristen's point was that the rec department one comes, it's still a full-size catalog.
It is.
But it's got a yellow or a green or a bright
Like a
orange.
stock.
They alternate colors.
Um,
Well, just
You
use.
know what- you know what it is.
Orange
Yeah.
postcard
Right.
is just a postcard, and I'm not, and the other, the other drop-off in town meeting was when we lost the local newspaper, frankly, but.
Yeah.
But, the local weekly that reminded people of what was on the warrant, but,
Just to introduce, oh yeah, go ahead, please.
I'll just say that I think this came up on Town Government Study Committee when I was on that, and we had kind of ended up thinking postcards were good because they saved paper, saved mail, and there is a profile of people in town that don't check their mail, and that's not how they run their lives. They're at work, they're on the train, they're doing things on their phone. And so for them, a link, you know, made more sense for them to see things, not time to read it. So, but hearing this, I actually agree that if there's a way to both do the mailing and make sure the mailing has, you know, information on how to access it online pretty clearly, I think that kind of accomplishes both goals in reaching different profiles of people.
Please.
I mean, one of the things that I think we have to keep in mind is that we have a very diverse population here. in Norfolk. And the largest growing segment of our population is over 60. And not everyone is on Facebook. Not everybody looks at their phone 12 times a day. People do still read newspapers. And we need to be advocates for everyone in this town. And I think printing and mailing that warrant is a very wise decision, because it reaches a broader audience. I understand the logic, you know, you could be a penny wise and a pound foolish.
Right.
And our job is to communicate as openly as we can to the community and reach every segment of the community. I sometimes think we're just a little too focused on a segment of the community that's on these things all day long. I mean, you know, go on the webpage, go on this. There are people that don't do that. A lot of people in this town do not do that. And we need to reach those people, and mailings are the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think in many ways, it's a shame we have to do one size fits all. My way of thinking of it is I wish people could just pick, you know, if you really want to get a town warrant, that's great, if you want to have a PDF. I wish people could opt in some fashion. I don't think that that's practical, but.
Well, we're still gonna put it on the website, we're gonna
Right,
put
I
it on
think to have the
Facebook.
broadest
Well,
coverage
yeah.
is to
Hit every
do
segment.
multiple,
and as a
multiple strategies,
you know,
right?
As an editorial comment, until 15 years ago, they used to mail the selectmen's version of the warrant and then an advisory version.
Correct.
So we used
Oh,
to do
interesting, I didn't know
mailings
that.
Yeah, they
for
were. They were
for
two
all
mailings.
meetings.
Interesting.
So you'd get one without the recommendations, and 2 weeks later, you'd get one with the recommendations.
So,
That was a waste.
Glad you don't do that anymore.
Yes.
in the purpose of, so just my only comments are, it seems to me, although I don't know how deep it is, but there is some strong interest expressed early on about budget and transparency. I think printing goes towards trying to demonstrate that we have transparency. So I'm happy to entertain a motion for us to vote to go back to distributing paper warrants to the citizenry and request the budget increase that would require.
Well, I will start my first meeting by making a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to go ahead and mail and print the warrants this year, and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. The mail gets a little bit more business this year. Maybe we'll get a
Well, we'll
post office
see,
back.
we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, we'll request it.
Sue, do you have a copy of the actual budget for this committee? Like, so, you know.
I can get that to you,
Limit,
I
you
printed
mentioned
it out.
that, the stipend is 6,000, how much is our entire budget, you know, in terms of
Well, if I include the reserve fund at 50,000, so 56,000, and then I believe we have $5,000 in the printing business part, and $2,000 in supplies,
Okay.
okay?
And what is the reserve meant for?
The reserve fund is meant for, if there's an emergency during the budget year, then.
Unplanned for.
Unplanned for, then the department head can come to, obviously, they speak with the town administrator first and get his or her blessing, and then they would come to this board and say, we have an unexpected, anticipated expense. It's X amount of dollars. For example, we had a server fail last fall,
Right.
very unexpected. They came to say, can we have money from the reserve fund
Okay.
to take care of this problem? It ended up being given back because of insurance. It doesn't always work that way, but that's what that money's for.
Thank you.
Are there other reserve funds, or is this it?
That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
So
We
if
are
something
in.
bad happens north of 50,000, we're scheduling a town meeting.
Yeah,
perhaps.
the last
It
line.
allows you the ability not to have to go to town meeting and
Right.
pull out of your free
But it's up
cash
to
or
this
your
group
stabilization
only.
fund, so.
Yeah, I
Well, the
wasn't sure
goal
if it
was
was
not to
actually money
avoid-
for us, or if it was that we just control it.
It's
Control it.
You
We control it.
get to
Thank
say
you.
yes or no, you don't get to spend it.
Yes, thank you.
Although the goal is not to avoid town meeting, but yes, it does prevent the
does.
in case of emergencies.
Does Blythe, do you have a history of how close we've come to maxing out on that every year? I'm just curious.
I would generally would say we don't.
No, it's.
But are we close? I mean, is it?
There was one year where we did.
Okay, well, I only have
Yeah.
9
2
months.
years.
9 months.
Yeah, usually, we've never spent the full amount. I mean, at least in my 15 years of experience, it was one year
Right.
where we did when we had the budget crisis.
Yep.
You may remember, I think it was 2008,
Yep.
when the state came in and cut our budget
Yep.
in January, and we had to make some major adjustments, and 7 people showed up for the town meeting to vote.
That was one.
That's the only time that we've hit the 50,000, I can recall.
And I think, as we did this past fall, we transferred money back into
Right.
reserve at town meeting to get back to 50, just so that we go through the rest of the year with that.
So, other budget issues?
Yeah,
before-
just sort of around the same, so just to feel temperature, like, is that enough? Like, if I take, is it?
It has been.
It has been
It
enough,
has
but.
been, it has been.
I think folks are comfortable.
We feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And then you also get into, do you really want, I apologize for this word, a slush fund of $100,000?
We don't want to make it too juicy.
Yeah.
Because again, the goal is not to avoid planning, it's just to buffer crises when they occur for which planning could not account.
Yeah,
Because it's a lot of work and expense to come to town meeting.
for sure.
So you wanna be able to deal with those things in that moment, A terrible example is, what happened with the North Shore with all the gas leaks, and suddenly towns were communities were spending money to address those that they couldn't have planned for. And that,
The common one is unanticipated legal expenses.
Yeah.
You know, that we just,
Get hit with.
you take a wild guess at what you think you're gonna spend this year.
I feel like town governments have been
Right.
hit, it's a lot in the press, cyber attacks and like you
We have
mentioned.
insurance for that.
We have insurance, okay. Well, okay.
Okay, so moving away from, we've discussed our mailing budget, we've just been talking about the contingency fund. Let's talk about the administration expense here. So conceptually, hearing what you're talking about, Susan, all the advisory board members have a portfolio of a department who they keep in contact with, have meetings with, spend some time getting to them know. Conceptually, perhaps one of our members of the advisory board, instead of having a departmental contact, could take on the administrative note-taking expenses in lieu of that. I would expect that would need to be a volunteer, though. I know folks are already committing X amount of time, and this cycle X is going up, northward for sure. So some discussion about, and thoughts about that? Us having a paid administrator part-time versus,
So just to kind of let everybody know what goes on, because it's a little more than just taking the minutes.
Mhm.
So you're obviously attending the meetings, which you're already here. You're taking the minutes and putting them in format at which the minutes are supposed to be a snapshot of what's gone on in the meeting. You have somebody else review the minutes, just to make sure you're on the same page. The minutes are then submitted to the town clerk. But you're gathering all of the material that's coming in from all the departments.
Exhibits, handouts,
Right,
presentations.
budgets, you send it electronically, but you also have to make copies of it, because not everybody comes prepared electronically. Some people like the paper, to have the paper to go through. You're scheduling all of the department head meetings for them to come in before you to speak. And, you know, you're making those changes. I'm not trying to throw the advisory committee under the bus, but you send about 20 emails before you are sure that you have a quorum to attend your meetings in the evening.
Yep.
And so I'm not, again, I'm gone in May, so that this isn't something that's going to directly hurt me, but there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. You have to have access to a good copier, and you have to,
Coordinating with
you would
Clyde
get
requesting.
the computer that I walk around with to do all of that with. But it during the fall town meeting, and especially even more so at the annual town meeting, it's not a couple of hours a week.
And there's the communication involved, hey, can we get the zoning board meeting, can we talk to so-and-so, so that does take some back and forth as well.
So I'm not trying to not
No, I
sell it,
understand.
it would be
Well, and
great.
coordinating the printing of the warrant.
Right,
And mailing.
And mailing.
And then you coordinate the advisory, who's doing what recommendations, and you provide those recommendations to, this year Blythe wrote her own motions. You prepare parts of the warrant, Blythe prepares the guts of the warrant, but the index and the, so you're heavily involved in that piece.
I only been on the board for a couple of years, but
Mhm.
I know that Steve was a detail guy. I mean, he sent a lot of emails, he tried very hard to organize meetings.
Mhm.
I think that was one of his frustrations.
Mm.
And I think that having a full-time job made it more frustrating for him. I would be concerned that if we didn't have someone who was able to focus, like,
Mhm.
spend 3 or 4 hours on the day that it needed to happen. If
Right.
you've got a full-time job, that becomes more difficult.
Right.
And having just reviewed a bunch of minutes, I told Sue I'm a great minute reviewer and editor and formatter, but I can't take minutes to save my life. I'll be honest.
Understood.
And I'm not sure, it's a skill set that, you need to be able to capture in limited language what actually happened. And I tend to leave a lot of things out when I take minutes, to be honest.
Okay.
My endorsement is to keep someone around, whether
Okay.
it's the same level or if it has to be a reduced level, but there needs to be someone who's professionally responsible for some of this stuff.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. Other thoughts? Discussion?
I agree.
Just knowing how busy the folks on this board are, I think that sounds reasonable.
There are 9 of us, I mean, the more people who are, exponentially communication, time and effort increases, the more cats you're trying to herd, that would be me included. Yeah. Other comments or thoughts?
Support all that.
We would like to keep the existing.
Okay, sending me into the lion's den with no savings and ask for more.
Yeah, we're asking for more.
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's called anchoring.
Okay, now, and I appreciate the time spent on this, although I want to get to the budget process, which is not us, which is 99% of the town budget probably, which I know some folks are here in the audience to have some input on. So, the budget process. Once upon a time, no. So let's start at the beginning. We have a mostly new select board. I mean, Kevin's been here a year, but the rest is net new. This is my first year chairing the advisory board. And there was a desire expressed at the select board meeting 2 weeks ago, I think it was,
December 17th.
or even earlier than that, okay, December 17th.
Time flies.
Yeah, it does, wow, with the holidays. To approach the budget differently this year. I think there's different sentiments driving that, and I don't know if folks had a chance to see that meeting or maybe had observed it, the 17th meeting. It was a very lively discussion. The points raised were, let's have more budget scrutiny. Some people believe that there was a lack of appropriate scrutiny or enough scrutiny in the past. Other folks said, well, we don't have to go that far, let's just, new people, we have a new town administrator, now is just a time to go deep into the budget and have a look at opportunities for savings, just to better understand what's in there at a level of granularity that wasn't shared by perhaps as many people in the past. I know that I've seen budgets come through, and I think there was a certain consensus on how that was done. I think in many ways people are looking for a revisit of what the consensus ought to then be. That's a very positive thing. Now, to that, am I capturing the spirit of that?
You are,
Okay.
yes.
I was also hoping to have a select board member here to also help coordinate with this. But in any event, procedurally, what that's translating into is the select board is asking each of the department heads to then do three things. First, create some form of presentation talking about year over year how your budget got to be where it was last year. 5-year period, I think, is roughly how far back people are going-ish.
Maybe 3.
Okay, three. So just to understand what's been used, not used, what's grown, shrunk, sort of explain to me how your budget got to where it was last year. That would be the baseline. That's step one. Step two, if there was 0 increase in spending compared to last year, what would that look like? So that's not level service, that's level funding. As all of us know, inflation, health insurance, everything goes up, so that would involve some definite trade-offs. And I believe that the spirit of this was the select board is saying, we're not looking necessarily to cut, we just want to understand what that would look like. We want to understand if there was completely level funding. Show me what that means in your world. That's the second step. So first step is the baseline. The second step is a 0% increase. Third step is roughly a 3% increase, what I think is kind of called a level service budget. Now, what would you add back in? So we talked about what it was last year and what would that look like this year with 0 increase. Now explain what you would prioritize to then go back in to get yourself back up to 3%. Am I summarizing this?
Very well.
Okay, oh, thank you. Now, different motivations, I think, are bringing people to this process, but I think they all share a common first step of just wanting a very granular look at trade-offs, what's possible, opportunities for savings. I think there are some people I know in the audience and just have expressed concerns about bloat in the budget, perhaps opportunities that haven't been unearthed in the past. Others were just saying, well, again, new people, let's just have a look at things change. This is time for some clearing of thought and coming to a new baseline. People were concerned that, are there going to be reactions to this? If on the one hand, kind of playing devil's advocate, a person might say, well, if the Arthur budget, or the Arthur department in the town budget, if you asked me for what would 0% look like, perhaps I would come back with a really draconian, we're going to shut everything down, life is going to end. But the hope was this not be something that's that confrontational. The goal is not trying to react, but get at a sense of possibilities, of opportunities. And if really that there are no opportunities for savings, perhaps that can be shared. I know there are some departments who I've watched get smaller and squeeze every year. So I've had a closer look than perhaps some people. So this is an opportunity for folks to see. Perhaps there's not as much slack or bloat is such a pejorative term. But again, I think that people want a certain amount of due diligence is the word that I would use, a certain amount of due diligence done, and they're pretty excited about having a look. And I believe there is I'll use the term marathon session being planned, where
February 8th.
on February, it's a Saturday?
Yes.
There's a Saturday where the various department heads are going to be presenting 3 years, how that department got to where that they were. What does a level funded 0% increase budget look like in their world?
Mhm.
And then thirdly, adding things back in, what would you do to then get back up to the 3%?
And I say there will be a couple of situations where we need to talk about things we need to do next year. The 3 elections, it's a complete reevaluation year. It's required of the town every 5 years. There's cost to that. There's some things that are just standouts because they're obligations of the town that we have to address that
Understood.
happen in the course of time.
Now, this is where the select board has landed. And again, I said there's some different impetuses for this, but I think they're all on the same page about wanting to take these next steps. So that's where we are today. Next question is, what's the role of the advisory board? Which actually came up at the December 17th meeting, and it was kind of fun to watch. Again, everyone's new. Some people thought, well, maybe this advisory board could be given assignments or something. So I think it came clear, it was more clear after that meeting that our role is to represent the town at large, a diverse group of interests, try to speak for the community in advance of town meeting, and review, study, come to our own independent understanding, our own independent conclusions. We, from a bylaw perspective, are allowed to request people come to us and answer questions about their particular budgets. And going forward, if we do see something that, in our opinion, looks like we're not comfortable with, we can ask questions. It can also go as far as we can submit our own budget line items. That it is something where we can submit our own budget separate from the board of the select board's budget. I think we're not at that point, and we're not. The goal is not to make this confrontational. I'm just trying to emphasize that we have our own due diligence obligation. And while the select board is going to have this meeting on, the 8th?
February 8th.
They're going to have this meeting on February 8th. I think there'll be a lot of valuable information presented there for people's respective departments. So if I'm responsible for the fire department, I don't know the best way for me to maybe watch the YouTube video from 1 hour, 12 minutes to 1 hour, 45. I don't know how
Well, it's going to be a public meeting, so
Right.
we need to put together a schedule of when each department's going to present.
Okay.
And share that, so that if you're interested in the fire department and it's on at 11 o'clock, then you can choose to watch it, come, whatever we decide to do.
So
You decide to do.
what I'm presenting is the thought, and we should discuss this, because this is, by no means, something that I dictate, but to me, it seemed like a real good opportunity for us to see that in-depth data as it was being shared. Not necessarily real time, perhaps you watch it remotely, but as that's being observed, digested, and evaluated by the select board, we have our own obligations to then get a sense of, how that's going. Excuse me, the information being presented. And additional questions and discussion that we want to have. Perhaps we want to approach the budget differently in that particular department's case. Perhaps they have a line item, excuse me, or a budget item that we would like more information on. We're not really going to know until we get there. So again, I wanted to share where the budget process has gone so far. I shared with Kevin Calcutt the meeting we're going to have today, just trying to understand our involvement, how we would like to coordinate with the information that's happening, but also that we have our own separate obligation to, again, exercise. Oversight isn't quite the right word, but just our due diligence, which goes in tandem, I think. Questions about this?
Just from, one of the questions that came up the last time was actual budget. So we saw the money that went back, but there was, however it was being shown to us, we weren't seeing what was actually, like what the actual numbers were.
You mean authorized versus actually spent?
Yes.
So that's come up a couple times, and when we get to the point of creating I think throughout the budget process, we're going to need to provide that to you and to the selectmen. And also for the town meeting, the document that goes to town meeting that people vote on needs to have more columns as well.
So being addressed is.
Yes,
yeah.
being addressed.
I would expect that also features heavily in the historical 3-year, now what brought us to here section.
Yes,
What happened last
what
year?
we put in the book that I envision it will be hard to try to keep up multiple versions of these things. That might be a little bit more static.
Okay.
You know, it might show 3 or 4 years of information, but there's also been an interest to tell us what you think you're gonna spend by year end. I'm not sure in the throes of the final days of town meeting, we'll have time to update that document while we're updating this one.
Yeah, that's,
So,
yeah.
you know, I don't wanna over-promise and under-deliver, but the message that has gotten loud and clear, that people want more information about how we got to where we are and what our spend is.
Blythe, you've referenced the budget book a couple times, and I guess I'm trying to get a sense of beyond a series of spreadsheets, which we've seen in various formats. What else is in that? Is
What I'd like
there
to-
text
Yep,
describing
so if
departmental
you've seen
responsibilities
the
and stuff, or-
Norfolk school budget
Yeah,
document,
yeah.
they have a page for each department, if you will, within the school that
Right.
explains what they do, what their objectives are, and some budget comments. And, you know, I'll pick on the weights and measures division. You know, we have a budget for weights and measures. I'm guessing that most residents, if you ask them what that was, they don't have any idea. You all know what it's about. We have to have the scales and measuring weighing devices of the town have to be certified,
Right.
and we pay the state to do that. You know, a paragraph or two that explains that, and a page for each department that says, this is the mission of the police department, this is how they're staffed, this is what the services they provide, hoping to give people just a bit more information about what it is they pay for. And a comparison of FTEs, how's the department grown over some time, and what does their budget look like over time? And so I wanna start with that, because up till now, they've gotten a spreadsheet that for a few years, I guess, just came out at town meeting. When I got here last year, I'm like, gee, we don't even know what we're voting on until we walk in
Yeah.
the door. Okay, let's give it out at the polls at least. Great, we did it a week earlier, and that was well received. And we put it on the website. Now let's see if we can add some words that people can look at, and maybe it's not gonna be a War and Peace, but it's, or whatever your favorite really long book is, but it's a little bit
I'm
more.
not sure that's a good analogy, but
Lord of the Rings?
Just say Tolstoy, just say Tolstoy.
Something that they can pick up and say, okay, I'd like to know a little bit more about what that is. And you can read it or not read it.
Sorry, one thing that we had discussion on was just how we do capital asset replacement. And so what seems, and I think you agreed, was like, okay, we need the cruiser. You have to justify why the cruiser has to be replaced. But we all know these assets are gonna turn over.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious if are we addressing it, are we looking at that any differently, or will it always kind of be like that?
Well, we haven't had, when I got here, I couldn't find a plan in the file, so we developed the 5-year, 50,000, this is what it says they need, and the price point they think it is. We've only gotten to the spreadsheet stage of that. The next step is to take that and put that into a document and explain to people, have them be able to read about the cruiser, the trash truck, the school expansion, whatever it is. That needs to become a part of the budget. I think what's tough right now is our operational budget that includes no money for capital. We depend on turnbacks that become free cash and excess revenue to be able to pay for some of that in the fall. And I'm not saying that's bad, that's very typical of communities like ours. Ideally, we have enough discipline in the budget over time to be able to start to put in some monies so that capital can become a regular planned thing and not a, gee, I hope it didn't snow too much, or we got an extra payment for something and we can afford something in the fall.
But not addressed in this process.
Not addressed yet, but I think it's a goal
It's
that
on
we have to
it's on
have.
Something I'd like to steer the conversation towards while we're talking about specifics, and actually before I even go there, so I would like to have a discussion about what's our best method of involvement and understanding of what's going to happen on the 8th of February. So I'm not sure how that works, but we'll figure that out.
I'm working on that.
Okay, thank you. Outstanding, thank you. However, citizens have asked questions about, okay, well, what does the advisory board do? I mean, if a department wants a 20% increase, do we all just get out the big rubber stamp and hit, oh yeah? What kind of backgrounds does the advisory board have? What kind of scrutiny is applied? I mean, do they ever speak up? I mean, I'm sort of characterizing some of the questions. And works both ways. It's not just a question of, are we bringing enough savings, but are we investing in what needs to be invested in? So people have questions. I know we don't have a ton of visibility, although, we're on TV. I'm not sure how many other ways to get the message out there or ask the people to come, and thanks for folks in the audience who have come today. But it does beg the question, how do we want to scrutinize and provide input or feedback to the budget makers while that's actually happening? Now, again, I'm suggesting that we look at this first big deep dive, and then we can kind of take it from there. And then if people are uncomfortable, or if people are seeing something that concerns them, then we should talk about it collectively. Although perhaps that's too loosey-goosey. I mean, what might concern Jim might be fine with me, or vice versa. I thought we could just have a short discussion about what we thought our due diligence looks like. Does that make sense? Because if all of us go off and talk to our respective departments, and we all have completely different philosophies about how to approach this, that could be a little chaotic. Does that question make sense?
I think it's gonna be hard to make a recommendation or settle on an approach until after the 8th, because I'd be interested in seeing how the departments approach the 3 tasks that they have. I was gonna ask, was there any commentary about no Washington monuments? Art referenced the idea that let's not try to go for the most draconian cut, meaning you're not gonna close.
It's an old trope about, the first thing we're going to do is close the Washington Monument when it comes to a budget, because no one wants to do that, and therefore no budget cuts.
Until we see that, I mean, to look at a zero increase budget is our approach is going to be completely different depending on what the department does, how big it is, and what the impacts will be in terms of staffing. I mean, this zero-based budgeting or zero increased budgets doesn't work if you've got a 2-person department and they both are required to get salary increases, and the budget consists of basically their salaries and $5,000 worth of supplies. I mean,
Blythe has pointed out certain things are structural.
But if the schools or the police department, then it might mean you have to lay off a couple of officers or some teachers, and that's where the rubber hits the road. A zero increase budget doesn't mean the same thing to a 3-person department as it does to the schools or the DPW, for instance.
Right.
Jim, you
We
got some
have-
thoughts on this?
But you have to let it kind of play out. I mean,
Yeah,
first, this
that's
is not
okay.
the first time the town has done a zero-based budget.
Right.
Contrary to popular opinion, we did this 3 years ago, we did it 6 years ago, we did it 9 years ago. We were on a 3-year cycle to do this.
Yeah.
So it's not the first time. Let it play out, let the department heads make their presentations and so on. You're gonna find, as we've found every time we've done this, that, and you heard it last night with the schools, that, 85% of their costs are in staff.
Right.
And if you look at what Blythe has to play with, you have less than 20%, 25% tops of negotiable money. So for every $10, she can only play with $2.50.
Right.
That's all she gets to play with.
Right.
$2, not even $2.50.
Yeah, well, you're right, barely that, it's about $2.20. So, you have to carve that out, and that'll take its due process. You've got a lot of fixed expenses, you've got health insurance, which we've renegotiated 100 times.
Yep.
You've got all of your various fixed costs that you just are not very able to negotiate. There's not much you can do. Then you've got your schools, and that's a whole different set of categories that you need to work with. So the town component of this is really not a lot of money, and people don't understand that. And you can cut and cut and cut, you're not saving a lot of money. You're not. And that's the hardest part for people to understand. But let the process take its place. This is not a bad thing to go through this again. We've done it before. And it creates a level of transparency, it creates a level of understanding. You talk about capital plans. We presented on 2 occasions to town meeting the thorough capital plan that the town meeting turned down on 2 different occasions. You remember them. So, efforts have been made to try and mitigate some of the costs that continually precipitate, that continually rise, and we presented that innumerable times to this town, but it costs money to do it, and the taxpayers have a right to say no. It's okay. They have a right to say no, there's no issue with that.
Any other comments before I go to the audience here who would like to?
Just one, I just want to make clear that, we're going to go through this exercise, and I agree, it's an important one. The selectmen haven't settled on a direction,
Correct.
a parameter.
Right.
So this is, we're information gathering and
Information.
sharing. I don't know exactly when they'll be ready to say, this is the, the level of budget, because at the end of the day, it's the obligation of the finance director to put the budget together. And he and I are gonna work hand in hand to figure out and deliver, once we have the parameter, what's a responsible budget that's balanced, that meets the obligations of the town and school. And that's then something that everybody can debate.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
what bothers me about this approach is that it's all defense. All we're doing is playing defense as if it doesn't project hey, here's where we're going. And, to say that, I understand the need to cut fat. There's a sense that there's some big ball of fat out there that we're going to get to. I got my own. But good luck. but it doesn't. I feel like, and I don't even know who this comment is for. Maybe for the select board, is that, hey, listen, we need a vision of. I don't mind if we're going towards something. I feel better about my taxes than, hey, I don't know, the roads. Why are we paying so much for salt? Or we'll pick a thing, and it doesn't capture really, not just where the, cutting out the fat is great, but it doesn't capture a vision of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to, to have a town costs money, costs go up. And we're not gonna be if DPW can't operate, this is a town that people are gonna wanna live in.
Yeah, let me, go ahead, yes, one more.
I mean, I have
comment.
like a million comments and questions, but I'll stick to one or two. I agree with you. I think that, I work for a nonprofit and my day job is budgeting for a $25 million nonprofit. So I have some experience in trying to get to a net zero budget by the end of the year. I think you can't cut and you can't get blood out of a stone, right? So I think there's gonna be some level of seeing, where there really can be cuts and where they've already been cutting for so many years that there's just nothing left to cut. I think it's important people see it for transparency, but hopefully we don't end up with a budget that is zero, in my opinion, because I think it shows we're not investing in the town, in the future of the town, to your point. But I think it's important we do the work to get there, especially with a bunch of new people, new residents, new people on the select board, new people on this committee. What I'm a little concerned about, and I did not get a chance to watch last night's meeting yet, but I've seen the meeting from the 17th a couple times, is this question about our department heads now having to go to both select board meetings and meetings with us. Is that reasonable to ask of them and, of us to have to go to double meetings? And how do we kind of manage the logistics of that so that everyone's getting the same level of information to make the same decisions without having people duplicate efforts?
And we're starting off, out of the gate, we're looking to understand and benefit from the presentations that are occurring for the
Right.
select board. So, we're not just gonna ask somebody to appear here for the sake of doing it twice.
Right.
I think per Jim's comment, we're gonna watch the effort play out, we're gonna watch the work that's being done. Make sure that we are grasping and understanding it and then doing our due diligence as well. Then we may need to then make decisions about questions that we would ask. Perhaps people would come here, perhaps they wouldn't. I don't think that we know yet. We do, as I understand, Jay pointed out some of our the bylaws. I have to go back and look, I forget the name of it, but we do have the authority to compel people to then come here. That's not, we're not looking to be confrontational about anything, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. Everyone has day jobs. So we want to be constructive and we don't want to waste effort.
Right.
But if we do need to go down a different path, we are authorized to then do that.
And I would just add, I'm very grateful that you're concerned about that, but I also equally want to make sure that everyone gets the information they need so you can make the decisions you need to, and so if it takes an extra meeting, it's important, and we'll do that.
Questions from the audience? I know I saw a hand up.
I just have 2 comments.
If you could come to the table, can he hear, can the audience hear him? Okay, good.
2 comments. My recollection of I heard is not zero growth, zero-based budget. They're very different. Zero-based budget is where you build your budget, you just don't layer an increase on top of it. You know, I did not go to last night's meeting, so I don't know what happened last night, but the meeting before, when it was brought up, it was zero-based that I heard. So I don't know if there's a miscommunication of zero
Why, can you
base,
clarify
zero
that?
growth, but
I think
they're
there's been
very
a-
different.
Go, please.
I think both have been talked about. I think
Okay.
there was an interest in no tax increase.
Right, there was
Which-
no 2.5%.
Right, which really
bump
gets
up.
us to fairly close to level service when you look at the things that we absolutely can't control, because they'll eat up the little bit of other increases that we have. So using a zero-based budget approach to perhaps get to expressing what a zero increase could mean is, I think we're both right.
Okay,
They're different things.
Yes.
One is the
Different
approach
things.
and one is the outcome that you could get from that approach,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily
they're
the
not the
outcome.
same thing.
Yeah.
Well put.
And I guess the second comment I'm surprised not to hear about, I think the comment about where your bulk of expenses is in salaries and then subsequent expenses, taxes are the health insurances and the payroll taxes that are associated with it. So I'm surprised not to hear that you're doing a budget of headcount and a review of headcount and challenging what does a cut in a headcount mean? What, you know, you talk about, I don't want to live in this town if I don't get this service. Well, if I don't have this person, what does that mean? Can I live with it? So I'm surprised to not hear about you start a budget process with a headcount review. Then that flows to all the other things. The expenses, you're right, the discretionary expenses are the smallest part of the budget. You don't start with those. You start with your budget busters. And you're not even talking about a headcount review, which kind of surprises me. That's my comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, was there a follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I had a related question around, I know the town just approved money for a compensation study, and so I'm curious as to how this plays in and how that might be sequenced with budget planning.
I don't expect that to impact this budget at all. I don't expect that work to be done until probably sometime over the summer. And, if it plays out the way compensation studies have happened in other places I've worked, the majority, the bulk of employees are gonna be in the right place compensation-wise, and you'll have a small group that's undercompensated, and you'll have a small group that's overcompensated. And so, the reason I really wanted to see this go through last fall was because I wanted to have the time to get that work done, not necessarily for this next budget, but because we have union negotiations with the clerical and DPW unions that will start probably late fall, and having that very up-to-date, real information, I think could be benefit management in its negotiations to have, here's what you really should be paid and here's what's reasonable in the marketplace, and hopefully be able to negotiate a more, a fair contract for everyone, but especially for the town.
Okay.
One idea that came up that I wanted just to have in circulation here at the select board's meeting, I think it was the one this week, or it was the one Monday. There were two different comments about how do I put this? You shouldn't go into a zero-based budgeting exercise like this with a zero increase budget, I'll just say that. You have to come in saying everything has to go down by 4%, everything has to go down by 2%. Unless you come in with some kind of a number for people trying to go down to, you'll never see any opportunities for savings. Now, that idea was brought up. There was, some people agreed with that, other people did not. Comments about this group, about, are we taking an approach that we believe has a reasonable success at identifying opportunities for savings that perhaps weren't seen before?
That 0% increase? Is that what you're asking?
I'm just saying, in general, if we just take a big step back and say, we're throwing out things like we're gonna do a 0% increase budget, we're going to now have a look at a 3% increase budget. Or forget about that, we need to come in with a 2% cut or a 4% cut. That all these things are designed for the sole purpose of trying to reveal opportunities for savings. And I'm just wondering, do we think that we're going about this in a reasonable fashion, following the select board's lead?
Couple comments, and I was going to bring it up earlier, but one of the pieces that's been missing so far tonight is any projections on where we're going to be at in terms of revenues next year. And I'm not saying we need to spend those revenues or anything like that, but it does play into if you're rebuilding departments from a zero-based budgeting perspective, there may be some interest in increasing a budget.
I think we have that data.
So,
But is
I
that-
thought I had sent, and if I hadn't, I very much apologize. We have Todd created a great spreadsheet that shows 3 or 4 years of history on revenues
Right.
and expenditures.
We didn't get it, it's in the select board packet from the
I will get
December
it to you.
17th meeting. It's actually really helpful because
Yeah.
it breaks out fixed versus discretionary as
Fixed
well.
versus discretionary, and it estimates new growth and state aid and what we think health insurance might go up by and so on. And so that's how we got to the town with, if all this came true, the town could afford a 3% overall increase, 3.07.
But I think we get back to the
But
question of should we spend
a
that?
related comment is that I don't think this board can say we need a 2% cut or a 4% cut or a 0% cut, or to address the gentleman's comment in the audience, is a reduction in headcount until some of this process plays out. I mean, we have
I
no.
didn't say a reduction, I said a review.
A review of headcount, but either way,
Okay.
we're not the body to begin that review.
No, I agree, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify.
Thanks for clarification.
Yeah, I mean, we're not the body to begin that review.
Yeah.
We need to have this process, especially the stuff that begins on or concludes or begins on the 8th, the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning.
And you feel this process would be a good way to reveal?
I think the baseline work combined with the 2 exercises is gonna get us something that we can chew on, but until that happens, I can't.
Okay.
I can't,
And
as
again,
a board member, say
I'm
that
just
we should
fishing.
advocate for a 4% cut. or-
I'm just fishing here. It's like we're going to be given some things that I think are very valuable. My
Yeah.
question is there something we should ask for that hasn't been offered yet?
The other thing that I've asked all the departments to do is to think about, our local receipts and the revenues that we raise through various user fees or whatever are not a big part of our budget. But for instance, we haven't looked at transfer station fees I think since 2012. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but if we're talking about a budget that may be a little tighter, is that something that we should look at? Is there a reasonable change that will help, the overall picture? And any
I'd be
other-
happy to help on that. As Jim probably knows, I have a deep and abiding interest in solid waste and recycling, so.
Okay.
And it's a level of
Or,
a level of
any
expertise
other
that
fee
I
that
don't
we
have anywhere
charge.
else.
Is
Okay.
it,
Well
That's
said.
good.
No, I think I think we all need to just take a step back and let the process follow its way through. And I think we're gonna have ample opportunity to review it. I mean, I've been through 21 years of budgets in this town.
Mhm.
And every 2 or 3 years of cycle, we go through this cycle, and it's a healthy process. There's nothing wrong with this, to take a look at it. We do look at head counts. We have looked at head counts in the past.
okay, good.
But we don't look at it just in terms of bodies, we look at it in terms of functions. What job, there are certain responsibilities, as you well know, there are jobs that have to get done no matter how. You have to have a board of, you have to have the assessments done, you have to have the finance department. There are certain functions that have to get done, and we have reviewed year after year what type of staff count we need to make that work. And one of the cautions I would say is that while I know that department heads can be somewhat territorial, it's a normal process where they can be somewhat protective of their budgets, they still have the best functional knowledge of what the requirements are of those jobs. And I'll go to DPW, for example. You look back, Todd knows, you look back at those prior budgets on DPW, there are some years where they were almost a 0% increase.
Mhm.
They have
Well,
been understaffed and
Yep.
underfunded for years.
Yes, agreed.
For years. So it isn't all piling on money, that we've spent. We are a residential-based tax town, whether we like it or whether we don't. That's who we are. And you know, if you wanna cut services, we can cut services, but that's what will happen. You will cut services. They may be acceptable cuts, they may not be acceptable cuts. That's the discussion we're gonna have. And that's a healthy discussion, there's nothing wrong with that. But let it take its course.
Very good.
Let's
Any
see
other
how it
comments?
goes.
Thank you, that's super helpful. Any other comments?
How
The
is it?
way that I think of it is things will come out of this process will be either what I would consider a savings opportunity, which to me means
May very well
we're
be.
gonna have a marginal impact on service, this is a chance to save something, or service reductions or trade-offs, where we're gonna say, I want more of this or less of that or whatever. So that to me is what I'm looking for through this process, is those opportunities to then manifest, and then when we see them, we'll need to have discussions about what we want, how the selectmen are seeing this, the select board are seeing this, and what our thoughts are about that in our oversight function.
I think one of the most difficult parts for us are gonna be sort through, and it's been this way forever, is the schools. You know, I mean, I've been deeply involved in the schools for over 20 years in this town, and they are very complicated budgets.
I know, I'm hoping someone will volunteer to perhaps be our.
Put me on
Yes.
your list, because I've been working with KP for 15 years. They're complicated.
Thank you, Jim, for
And,
volunteering, I know. It's the
they're
big
hard,
commitment.
and you really have to get underneath the covers and understand what their costs are and how they operate. And as you heard the superintendent say last night, they're a town unto themselves.
Yes,
You know, they pay their own health insurance, they pay all their coverages, they pay their own bus fees, you know, I mean, they're a town entity, if you will, in terms of how they operate.
And a regional district has its own layer of complication that's
Absolutely.
different than
Yeah,
the local
the
school.
high school budgets and elementary school budgets are night and day.
yep,
And people try to rally one against the other, and it's an unfair comparison. They're entirely different, and they're not comparable. And you really need to get and understand that, and that's been a constant fight, you know, with all of the communities. I mean, Norfolk has been supportive of the schools, some other towns have not been. We've struggled with this forever. We'll struggle with it again this year.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it, because they've got built-in 3% increases before you get out of the bed. I mean, that's the way it is. So that's gonna be the hard nut, because that's 2/3 of your budget right there.
agreed, and I really appreciate your helping to scrutinize that, because I know you have that kind of background.
That's 2/3 of your budget.
Which also raises a question, reminds me of a question. People asked in the December select board meeting, who are the advisory board? Like, how do you pick them? I mean, what do they do? Do they have any financial qualifications at
It's a
all?
lottery.
What's that?
It's a lottery.
It's a lottery.
We lose.
Oh, the short straw, yes, and you get nominated by Jay. Thank you, Jay Cohen. No, and just to sort of share, and I volunteered to, Kevin, I'm happy to go speak to a select board meeting about the advisory board and how we work and the process and stuff. We don't publish our resumes, but all of us are actively involved in trying to understand the town. All of us have different backgrounds. I would say at least half of us have financial backgrounds in terms of project management or like a CFO type of a career track. You were just talking about your background, which I think is great to have that kind of experience. So people have to be active and involved and interested in what happens in town. And then you layer on, I think we do have a lot of financial expertise here, both whether it's working with the town itself or outside of that. So that's something I feel very excited about us bringing to bear. In any event, that covers the process, so if there's no other thoughts on that.
Sorry, Arthur.
Yes, please.
So, in response, you're gonna go talk to the selectmen about who we are?
I
How
think
do we
people
get
have
that
talked to them
information?
since then. I'd be happy to then go and talk to them. I offered, but I don't know that they need that or would want that.
Is it the selectmen who are asked, or?
Some
Select
people on the select board had questions, as well as the audience. It wasn't just the select board, but some of the questions that I heard, and I think, again, everyone's new.
Yeah.
You know, so I heard things thrown out like, well, you know, if the advisory board aren't really helping the town come up with a budget, why involve them at all? And, you know, to me, it's like, well, we have to pass a recommendation. So,
Is there-
I think that's been remedied since then.
I guess where I was going to, sorry, Dave. Where I was going to was, does it, I don't remember, on the website, is there a description of?
I don't think so. I mean, it mentions briefly.
No, it just has your names and,
There's a paragraph about what we do.
So I need to write a little narrative about advisory for the
Why don't
budget
you write a
book?
little narrative about advisory?
so some
Right,
people
I'm
might.
sorry, was that a joke, or you?
No,
you
I'm
have
serious,
to.
I'm serious.
You have to.
Because someone should be able to pick up
People
the
should
book.
know what we do.
So
Right, but not in prior years, this was kind of discussed, because some towns do kind of put up a little bio about each person on the advisory board. And some people weren't comfortable with where, you know, crazy things happen in this world, where they work and, you know, where they're located, or, you know, that would made them uncomfortable.
I see.
You know, and there have been situations, not in this town, but, you know, where you hear of employers being contacted when someone shows up for a job interview and somebody recognizes them. So I think some board members wanted to be able to keep their professional lives. No one ever had a problem saying, I am X, Y, and Z at a company and I do X, Y, and Z, but not identifying that company.
Titles and specific jobs. and
Right.
whatnot, but-
That was some people's concerns earlier. This board may feel differently. This board may say, Sue, here's my resume, tell them to post it, you know, post it up there. But in prior years, and don't forget, there wasn't as much social media and as much access to people's personal and private information as there is today.
Yeah.
With a little bit of information, you can get a lot of information. So that was why in prior years it was chatted about.
Would that, maybe that wouldn't solve the problem, maybe that would just create more controversy.
I think having a blurb on the website that describes what it is that we do is, beyond, like I said, talks about there, we have a contingency fund. I mean, there is a paragraph up there, it's just not that.
Arthur,
I'm gonna take it to, I'll come back, I'm gonna review it and maybe bring it.
Great, thank you.
Arthur, you said something earlier that I think is something that people don't understand about the advisory board is we essentially are representing the town and the town meeting.
Correct.
If you look at, and I had to explain this to a previous board member, is that the selectmen are like the executive and town meeting is the legislature. And we're the Ways and Means Committee for the legislature.
Yeah.
So we are a reactive committee in a lot of ways. I mean, and it's something, we theoretically spend more time than your average town meeting member understanding what the budget is, and our recommendations are based on that time we spend.
Correct.
It's not our job to write the budget, but it is our job to understand the budget and make recommendations.
But we also do have the authority to submit all the
Oh, right,
budgets.
and we can
Correct.
change the budget. We
Yes.
can make recommendations on changing the budget.
Which also I don't think is quite widely known. But yes,
I think another thing that confuses some people, both residents and some folks in the select board, and confusing is maybe the wrong term, but is that obviously certain towns have finance committees and
Yes.
certain towns have advisory boards, and so, you know, when I heard the question come up, well, what's the financial literacy background of the people on the advisory committee? I think what's different about our committee versus other towns that have a finance committee is that because we have to deal with all kinds of warrant articles that are not just financial in nature, we have to have a more diverse background to this committee. So not everyone's gonna have a financial background and not everyone's gonna have an IT background, but we have to cover the broad spectrum.
Zoning articles.
Right, so I think it's important to make that distinction when people ask about why we're not a finance committee, and how that's different. You know, if Dover has this and Norfolk has
Right.
this, why are they structured differently?
thank you for taking a crack at it, so that would be helpful. Okay, so I believe this concludes the budget section. We will work with Blythe and publish how we can access the information being presented. However, we do need to know which departments we're going to be
Right, so I don't-
watching out for.
Right, I don't think we can set up any schedules tonight. I think we need to wait February 8th
Okay,
to come, and like Jim and suggested, we let it play out, and then we, you know, after that meeting, and we sit down and decide. Maybe you don't wanna see everybody after seeing 3 people that you felt delivered, you know, you don't have any questions on, or maybe you do wanna see everybody. So I think that waiting until after that.
very good.
Is a good-
And I think in any case, we'll want to see the materials for sure.
Oh, of course.
Just to scrutinize that. Okay, so we've talked about the budget process, our budget, the schedule, and we're gonna hold off on other department assignments. Do people know what their old assignments were?
It's
Yeah,
actually
that's right
one
here.
of them, that's a minute we'd like to discuss.
So, you were the fire department.
Mhm.
Steve McDonough was police and animal control. DPW was Dave Lutz, surprise, surprise, after what you just told us. Norfolk Schools was Susan Klein. KP schools with Peg Driscoll. Susan Klein has kind of jumped onto the B1 district, so
She may-
we.
I was planning, but she may wanna do it, so.
Okay,
So we may, I don't know if we wanna combine the schools. Planning and land use is Dave, library and senior center is Jonathan, and facilities is Mike and Brian.
okay.
I will volunteer for schools.
Yes, it'd be great
For
to
a volunteer.
on that one.
Okay.
As for police, I mean, does that, it doesn't really go with fire, especially now with the Metacom. I mean, do those two go?
Medicom is separate.
It is totally separate.
So, does police and fire go together, or should they be separate?
I think they have to be.
You could combine them.
Yeah, they've been combined in the.
So why don't I do police and fire, unless somebody has a
Well, you don't want-
burning desire?
Just
Just
thinking-
comment you won't have any real input to, but please.
Okay.
But I can talk about that.
Thank you for laughing.
So I don't know if you want to give some of the other folks who are not here a chance, a crack at that, instead of deciding. I don't.
I would like that, as soon as we can get a hold of them. My concern is we're not gonna be able to meet again until it's already in progress.
Okay.
If people
So I
wanna
think
reach out
may-
until then and find out information, go for it.
Yeah, maybe those that are interested tonight in particular areas,
Yeah.
take what you're interested in, and then what's left, we'll divvy up.
Well, I've had a question.
Just say, I'm on the Medicom board,
Oh, cool.
so I can answer that.
Question, thank you.
We had a meeting and started looking at the budget today, so.
Okay. And we should distribute, well, department wants to get going. I guess we could just wait until the 8th and not give the list out until that happens to, the fire chief, and DPW chief.
Prior to the 8th, though, we're gonna get information on the 8th in case I wanted to go or something.
Oh, I
Yeah.
can't
Okay,
get,
you keep talking about the 8th like we're not gonna see anything until after that, but.
No, I would give it to
I'd
you.
love to
Okay.
know what's going on the 8th.
Okay,
I would like to give you all
Yeah,
what
no,
the
yeah,
selectmen
yeah,
get.
absolutely, thank you.
so just to get a running head start on this, let's just assume that people's assignments are what they were, barring the changes that we just made.
Okay,
Because that would be nice.
So like brand new folks like myself and Jackie, I can't speak for Jackie, but, should we be
So we're not
taking
meeting
some
on
of
the
these
5th,
on?
is
Should we
that
be,
correct?
like,
You should-
tag teaming with folks, like to kind of learn how it works? What
Who
do you
do
guys
we
think
wanna-
is the best?
Are you interested in any of this stuff?
Library, but I know Jonathan has it, so.
Piggyback on
yeah, I
I'm
don't
technically only
necessarily.
on this board until the May cycle, so we'll see.
That's
It's not
what
up to
you
me.
think.
It's not up to me, right?
So we're-
But I'd like
We're
to be
going
learning as much as I
poll for
can, so.
different meeting dates, so.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I'll
And
send that email
Kristen, do you
tomorrow.
have questions? Please feel free to call.
Yeah, absolutely,
Library, go for it.
sure.
Okay, now we needed to talk about minutes
Yes, we
to
did.
approve.
Yes, so I am in the process of not only getting some much behind minutes up to date, but also, as many of you know, the year of 2015 and 2017, although I handled all of the administrative duties, I dealt with a personal situation that did not allow me to come to all of the meetings. And a couple of my former committee members graciously offered to take some minutes, but after doing some back checking and homework, they have all moved on and many moved out of town. Their minutes are somewhere on their computer, I'm sure, but.
Off the country. No.
Yeah, so it's caused me to just kind of take a look back, and I'm going to be doing that over the next couple of months, to be bringing to make sure that I have absolutely brought everything up to date. And I'm also going to be re-voting all of the minutes, because I am afraid that I just want to make sure
Sure.
that nothing fell through the cracks. Well,
Understood.
we didn't have that person sitting in the meetings. I appreciate all that they did to keep me in the loop, but this was something that needed some attention.
So are we looking to improve some minutes on mass here?
So I sent a bunch to Dave.
I'm the clerk,
He's the
Yes.
clerk.
so.
So we are gonna-
I reviewed
yep.
and edited a bunch of meetings. I didn't do any of the ones I was not at, so basically they start in November of 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
16 months ago.
So he'll make the motion and then I'll attach a list.
Okay,
I'd like to make a motion to approve minutes from a series of meetings as edited.
looking for a second?
Second?
Okay. And Sue's gonna read out the meeting dates.
Yep.
And I'm going to.
And then I'll
make sure
add
they're
this,
the ones I read.
the list. June 26, 2019, March 13th, 2019, no, October 16th, 2019, And then November 19th, 2019. I believe that gets us through fall town meeting.
I reviewed some, okay, I also did some from 2008.
Yep, I'm getting there.
All right, fine, all right.
Okay. November 14th, 2018, November 7th, 2018, June 15th, 2018, May 8th,
I wasn't at that
2018.
meeting, so.
Right, so
Okay.
these were voted before, but I'm just bringing them
Okay.
forward again. April 4th, 2018, November 1st, 2017, October 11th, 2017, October 4th, 2017, March 8th, 2017, October 12th, 2016, June 29th, 2016, May 10th, 2016, March 23rd, 2016, March 16th, 2016, March 2nd, 2016. Again, some of these may already appear on the town's website. They have been signed off, but I just want to make sure that all the bases are covered. And I will be coming to you at our next meeting with what I hope is the last batch.
Very good, so all these have been reviewed either recently by our illustrious clerk or were reviewed earlier and posted. Any discussion about the motion?
I did make some grammatical corrections to ones I wasn't at, but I wasn't obviously able to make any substantive.
And we'll make those corrections.
Okay, any questions or discussions? All in favor of approving the minutes just read, please say aye. Aye.
I need to abstain as I was most likely at that meeting, but not as a member of your board, so I
You
will
appear in
have to
several of the
abstain.
minutes, yes.
I'm
All-
sorry,
You appear in several of the
I'm
minutes.
sure I do.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, the ayes have it with one abstention.
Okay.
Do you have a quorum with 4 votes on that?
Nope,
5.
we did not.
You
No,
abstained?
actually,
Oh,
I
there's-
can't vote.
there's-
Well, I mean, I can vote, but I'm abstaining. Does that eliminate your quorum?
Yep.
yep.
No, that does, because there's only 5 of us.
Okay, so I'll be back at the next meeting with a
That's
really
fine.
big pile, and my apologies to
I'm sorry.
No,
Mr.
that's an
Haddad
excellent, you're an
I
excellent
can't vote for
point.
something I
that
wasn't
I
at.
don't have an extra person here to get these to the clerk next
Just
week.
thought there were
but
6 of us.
You'll be my first call.
Thank you, no rush.
Okay, thank you.
You know they're in the
We'll
process.
do these minutes so you can vote on these ones.
Deal.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, so with that being said, thank you for all the coordination behind the scenes, both Sue and Blythe. Motion to dismiss,
I so moved.
seconded? Okay, thanks everyone, have a great evening.
Thanks for taking the guys.